Marhaba and how's it going, everyone? For those who are new to the show, this is Yuwab, a space dedicated to have answers to calm your mind, empowering your workplace, and trust me, eventually it will leave you in a very good state of mind for you to go ahead and unlock your full potential. I'm your host, Saeed Alghafri, and let me express how grateful I am for having you here and you allocating the time to hear me out. You know, let's get real about values and purposes. And, every time I hear this, whether it's values, whether it's purposes, now compared to a long time ago, I have mixed feelings. So let me just throw it away to you. What comes in mind when I say stuff like define your values, something like follow your purpose and find your purpose? You would have mixed feelings around that. And let me just share with you a story throughout my whole career. When I started my career, the first time I walked into the first company I worked in, they had values and they had purposes, they have a purpose and they have a mission statements. And honestly speaking, I could not connect to that board. I couldn't connect to the values. I didn't see how would I be there. And it was kind of a puzzle for me, specifically when I walked into the company that I worked in the first time. With time, things got a little bit complex in my career. My job became a little bit more demanding. And at that time, I said, let me go and do my MBA. And when I did my MBA, throughout the whole MBA journey, which is a complete thing that I don't want to go through, but it was very challenging. Throughout the end of the MBA, my Master's Business of Administration, we had to go through a strategy making exercise. So we did strategy via several things. And I remember they told us, have some values, have a purpose, have a mission statement, and what's your vision out there. To be completely honest with you, I was still not convinced how would they basically tally with the strategy. But we did a fantastic job in terms of making a strategy, and it went very well. Only recently, when I became a C-suite person, and now currently I'm a CEO, values became very, very important. And every time I walk into the office, I see how people react. I see what happens. I see how we basically conduct our work. And it's all around the corporate cultures. And throughout the episode, I'm going to explain what is corporate cultures. But what's really important here is values are very important. Where did that whole journey start? I do remember that during sometimes before, let's say 2019, 2020, our company took us to a workshop where it was more about well-being and how can we basically apply those concepts in our workplace. And at that time, I was fortunate to have a one-to-one time with the coach at that time. So we had the guy who was basically conducting the course. And when we did it at that time, it was very important that he would basically have 1 hour or 2 hours or a session where we basically talk about stuff. So the first question he asked me, he said, Saeed, what are your values? What exactly, who are you? What are your values? What is your purpose in life? And to be completely honest with you, I did not have those written. It was all over my head. If you ask anyone, they will tell you, you know what, I have it somewhere in my head. And the guy tried to explain to me the importance of it. And he gave me his example in terms of doing the values and then taking it forward. And one of the things, he showed me his values. I think he had around 6 or 7 at that time. And he had a purpose on the top of it. And one of them was around having a family and then be independent. And the way he did it is really beautiful because it's the value and then it has some stuff to ensure that the value is basically achieved or basically anticipated. One of the things he had, which was a little bit nice, he said, I want to have a house closer to the beach. because like the guys love surfing. He wanted to be closer to the beach, and closer to the beach means for him he's closer to nature, and this is something very close to his values. And he told me, Saeed, you know what? It happened to me. And being a guy who likes to try a lot of stuff, I said, you know what? Let me put it to the test. So what happened after that? This is back in 2019. I basically sat down for a couple hours, and I made my values. And again, it wasn't according to any specific system or process or a structure. I just sat down, and then I'm gonna go through what I've been through. There were a couple questions that I've done, but eventually I managed to basically have my values after 3-4 hours. And then I had a purpose on the top of it. Then I came the next day. I said, you know what, let me have a look at it. And I had to make some changes. So it took me 2 days to come with my values. Now, just to share with you what wasn't there. One of my main values was inspiration. I want to be inspirational. And I had a complete tasks or actions that I'm going to work on. One of them was to do my LinkedIn profile and work on my personal branding. And alhamdulillah, today my LinkedIn is really doing, alhamdulillah, very well. You know, people appreciate the content I put, and it's good. It's really good. Now, after 3 years, what happened? I just looked at the values and the things that I have there, and most of them were happening. Everything happened. Now, don't come and say, okay, Saeed, okay, it happened. I've made a big success. No, it wasn't like that. Some of them have a complete failure. It was a complete failure in terms of the specific that I've done. But I've done it. I had that fulfillment happening. I was very motivational, although the result was a complete failure. And some of them succeeded. So don't really come away from this saying, okay, Saeed, تراك انت قلت لنا, okay, you told us that, you know what, you have to basically do the values and it will happen. Some of them will be workable and some of them wouldn't work. But it gave me that sense of fulfillment and motivation after looking at them after 3 years. Now, after 3 years, I've looked at it and I said, you know what, I want to be much more inspirational. And that's where I had the idea of the podcast. And you know what, I'm talking to you right now. So it's very important that you have your values at the end of the day. Now, one of the things that I've learned is that the values and the purpose really come together. They are very, very important that they come together. And you know, when you look at it, the things that I've learned is that human beings are a collective of values, you know? Everyone you see, everyone you interact with, okay, this person is basically showing their values. So it's basically that person, it's basically them, the values are in action when you speak to them. And over time, the values and the purpose changes. And this is very important. You can't stick with them for a long time, because when we start from, let's say, college time all the way that we are in today, or wherever you are in your career, it's very important that these changes, and you need to basically reach a point where you review it. Now, by the end of this episode, you will really understand what are the values and what is really purpose. What do they mean? And I see a lot of confusion when I speak to people. I see a lot of confusions. And the question here is, do you really need them? You know, hearing my story and seeing what's there out there, and, you know, being, let's say, a CEO of a company, yes, you really need them. It's a spoiler, but again, you really need them. And why do they really matter at the end of the day? And how would you discover them? I mean, how would you find your ways around it? I told you my way at that time was, you know what, I'll sit down, I'll basically have specific framework and a question, and I'm going to share that with you. And then every time you basically interact with someone or you're out there is something called value clashing. And I'll explain that when we go through the context. So it's this value clashing I see a lot, specifically those who I coach. When I coach someone, You see, values are prevailing. Some of them are prevailing, some of them are lower. It's like that. It's like when you listen to a song, you lower the volume and you make the volume high. So this is how values are. And a classic question I get is that if I have my personal values, can I basically apply that in the company I work in? Do they really match with the values that are in the company? Before I go into what I explained to you and what we're going to get away from this episode, I'd like to share with you a very small story that I'm going to touch on later. When I went to the USA, before I go to the USA, I had this dream. I said, because I used to love video games at that time. And, I always wanted to go to Japan, invent new video games and computers and stuff like that. So I said, I'm going to go to the USA and study computer engineering. All right. I had no one to tell me, okay, what are the values? What should be the purpose of me going to the USA? But guess what? I came back. I did not study computer engineering and I studied chemical engineering. So when I was there, honestly, it just hit me. I was like, you know what? I'm here because eventually I want to go back and I want to create an impact. That was my purpose. Now, how I do it, whether computer engineering, chemical engineering, wherever the case is, all right? That's basically what I want to do. Where I failed is that I wanted to make computers and make video games. I did not have the values that would basically motivate me to reach what I wanted to do. And that's the problem out there. Specifically when you're a student, you maybe miss guidance, but now you basically need to work on it. Specifically when you go to the work, when you have a big family or a small family. I have a big family, so that's why I'm saying this. Or you have parents, or you have friends. I mean, it depends, but this is becoming very important. So this is what I missed when I was in the USA. And I ended up not studying computer engineering nor video games. And this is where I am today. So I did a mistake or I failed. But now I'm basically very proud of where I am today. So don't really feel bad that the values or the actions that you put are failing, because you're learning and then you're going to do it better next time. Now, the question that comes now, what is purpose? All right, after explaining all that. Now, purpose is your why. Okay? Why do you exist? What is your aspiration? And what is your motivation to exist in this life? So it's a reason for your existence. All right? And what I see out there, people misunderstand purpose with the end goal. So purpose is not the end goal. It's the reason why you want to reach that end goal. And that's very, very important to basically distinguish. Now, values, are the actions that brings the purpose to life. As simple as that. Now, both of those terminologies are applicable to you or the company you work in. Now, if you remember my example, I always wanted to say I want to go and study chemical engineering or computer engineering. That's my end goal. But again, that's not my purpose. The reason why I wanted to do that is because I wanted to create an impact. I wanted to basically do something. I wanted to contribute to this and that. Some could say I wanted to do research on chemical engineering, or it could be computers, or whatever the reason is. Now, that road to graduate as a chemical engineer is very difficult. It's not going to be that easy. There are going to be stuff there. You're going to face stress. You're going to have a lot of stuff happening to you. Now, what's really important during that journey is you have the values to motivate you. Okay? So, for example, you will have determination as a value. You will have something called integrity. You will have aspiration. For me, when I was there, I really focused on playing. I was very much enjoying my time at that time. And I a little bit compromised on studying. And that's why I shifted to chemical engineering. And it's a big drama, which I don't want to share with you, but maybe maybe I'll do it with you later. But again, it's not a good time in my life. So, do you really need them? Yes, you do need them. And again, as I mentioned to you, when you speak to anyone, Notice what comes from them. And that's their values in action. If someone is speaking, they're trying to solve, the whole world's issues, challenges. You see that this is basically there. This is basically them. This is their values. Look at me now. I'm talking to you. What exactly do you sense? What are my values? Yeah, I did mention one of them, which is to be inspirational. So think of it this way. Human beings are a collective of values. Now, how do you want to show up? As a person, or as a company? Because at the end of the day, you want to show up being your best. And that's the most important thing. Yeah? Now, when you understand your values, when you understand yourself, and I call that self-awareness, and this is very important. When I coach people, I really notice them, how they react, how they talk. And these are their values. When they talk about something that is basically from their, that motivating them, I can see their body language, I can see their face expressions. So it gives you that sense of existence. And it would make you much more better to navigate and go through life very much, in a challenging way, but in a nice way, I would say, because, you can't really take away stress from yourself. And that will ground you eventually. That will ground you to your foundation and to your spiritual part. And we spoke about that in the past. Now, when you go to companies, etc., when they define the purpose, when they define the vision, when they define the values, and I've seen that, it brings people together. People are basically very much connected to these aspirational stuff. And you can have a very clear strategy and very clear, I would say, set of planning in terms of resources, let's say tools, and exactly what you wanted to do. Now, what's really, really important, this is something that happened to me in the USA, and it happens to me all the time. When things go wrong, when things get tough, you always need to connect to your spiritual world. And I spoke about that in the past. And that is basically your values and your purpose, because that will light the way for you. It will really push you forward, And إذا استوالك أي شيء, if you fall into a problem, a challenge, etc., trust me, you need your values. And as I mentioned, you will get that deep sense of pride, fulfillment. For me, it really grounds you down to who you are. And that will give you an identity when you basically do it this way. Yeah? So that's the values, the purpose, and the why around it. Now, how can you basically find yours? Yeah? Trust me, it's not that difficult at all. And I've done that in the past. It's easy. You just go to the internet and just copy-paste, copy-paste the content and say, I've done a benchmark and that's it. Yeah? I'm sure you did that, maybe one or two. And I used to do that before I became a C-suite person or a CEO. But trust me, what you did there is you did someone else. You took someone else, values and purpose that fits, fits their culture, fits their people, fits their environment. Don't get me wrong, it may work on you, and I call that luck, because each company, each country, each family is different, because within that group of people, within that environment, there are people, and people are really different. Every person is different. So we need to capture the right values and purpose when it comes to that. Now, think of it as a brainstorming, Think of it as a brainstorming. Eventually, you will end up with, it could be values, it could be purpose or purposes, and it could be many things, many other stuff. And that's what happened to me when I did it. And eventually, I have to refine it. And trust me, eventually, when you have also a lot of, let's say, people, if you're in a company, you will have a lot of people, and you're going to have different opinions, different say on it, and then you will come up with what fit you as a person or as a company. Now, if you need some guidelines, and that's what I did when I started, and this is something probably that you will have to note down, is that, and I call that more or less like kind of a self reflection, is that start with this question: what do you really care about? Start with yourself. What do you care about? Because when you start thinking about what you care about, it has very much of a meaning. It's basically you, and you're going to be very much connected with that. List that down. You don't need to list them. Just write it down. Just put it there on a piece of paper, and then later on you can cluster it. And then ask yourself the second question: what are you naturally good at? What are you really good at? نحن عندنا مشكلة. We have a problem. We think that we're good at everything. Fact of the matter, you are not. You are good in specific stuff. So that will give you that focus. I'm really good at that. I'm not good at this. Once you do that, the third question should be: what are some of the issues or the things that you can make better in the community that you are in, or what matters for you within your community? That's the third one, because that gives you that sense of belonging, because these stuff are external and they will impact you eventually. And it's very important to look at that. Yeah? And the last one here is, what are some of the challenges? What could challenge you? When you look at these three things, the three questions I mentioned, the last thing is, what could be challenging for you? All right? Once you do that, then you'll be able to identify the values that would support you. And then some people that I know usually do some other stuff. Some people may go to the internet, or may reach to a coach, or they may go to specific, let's say, assessments or anything. And they may take, let's say, an online assessment to help them identify their values. But trust me, eventually, if you answer those questions, it will give you more or less 80%, or let's say 85% of that assessment. And you know what? Ask people. Ask people. People know more than what you see. And that's very important, because people see you when you are in action. That's very important. And what I call that is that 360. These are the blind spots that you can see and other people can see it. So ask them, get that feedback. It's very important. And as I mentioned, in companies, you can run surveys, you can run workshops. It's much more easy. You get a lot of people in there, and then you can work on that. Something that I like to do is, and someone told me that a long time ago, is, Saeed, imagine yourself in the future. Yeah? How do you see yourself in the future? And this is a very nice one. I mean, again, I don't want you to think like you're going to be fat or you're going to be skinny. All right. I remember when I used to be young, I thought I'm going to be fat when I grow up. But you know what? I'm the same. Ask anyone, they will tell you Saeed, when he was 16, is similar to whom he is today. But again, reality here is, ask yourself, who do you want to be in the future? And then eventually you will end up with your values and with your purpose. And again, don't really think that you can master that from day one. All right? You're going to have to go around it. You're going to have to basically do some refreshment every 2 years, 3 years. Depends on the circumstances that you go through. It could be personal, or it could be market dynamics when it comes to companies. Now, I spoke about value clashing, and I see that a lot, honestly, when it comes to values. Today, when you do that, you'll end up with maybe 5, 6, let's say 3 for the time being. All right, you're an easy person, or like me, I like to keep things simple. You're gonna end up with 3. Now, when you speak to anyone, all right, you, as we said, you are values and actions. And when you have a collective people talking or approaching something, imagine it's like a bunch of people with different values, all right, and they're coming together. That's why the corporate culture is very important because people will have shared values when it comes to companies. So what's really important here is that when you have that value clashing, and let me give you an example. Imagine one of your values is family. All right? Family is really important for you. And in the same time, health is very important for you. All right? Now, what happens is that, let's say the evening is approaching and you really want to go to the gym. You really want to go and work out. All right? What happens is that, let's say you get a call from your son, your, let's say, mother, your parents, your loved one. Which one are you going to basically give preference or priority to? And that's what I mean by values clashing, is that which one are you going to select? Yeah. For me, when I did my values, what really is a priority is family. I wouldn't even compromise on that. I would compromise on working out. I know it's very important and I love working out and it's very much de-stressing. But again, at that moment, the family value will be the one that stands and nothing else. The same goes when you go to work. All right? Let's say you have a teamwork value and then you have, let's say, something around honesty. And then you are in a teamwork and then someone is not honest about giving you the feedback or something like that. You're going to be really disturbed that that person is not honest. But again, you have that teamwork value very much prevailing. So which one would you choose? Right? That's what I mean by value clashing. Now, let me give you a challenge. The challenge here is, can you name one of your company's values? Just name one. And again, I know I've been there, I've been a victim. I honestly sometimes didn't know what are my values or what are my company values, but now I know them and I'm living them. The second question here is, do you actually live them? Yeah, you see what I'm saying? So what are your company's values? And look around. Do you live them? Do the people live them? If they live the values, then you've achieved your corporate culture as a company. If they don't, then you have a problem with whatever corporate cultures you anticipated. And that's what I mean by corporate culture. Corporate culture here is just a collection of values, and it brings people together. All right? For me, I can see it. When people are not motivated, when I see things, when I look at the values and I see the actions, I see how people are interacting in meetings, etc., I can tell you whether the values are basically, whether the people are really living the values or they're not. Now, I'll talk about corporate cultures in future episodes because this is one of the deep topics that I like. I like corporate cultures because I love to see it. Let me give you an example before we move on. You know, when I travel outside the UAE or when someone comes to the UAE, the first thing that they walk away from the UAE is the UAE has a very good service level. Like the service here is amazing. When you go outside of the UAE, I don't think you will find such service. And most of the people who come here swear on it. The second one is this country is safe. And that's what the leadership have put. These are the grounds, the foundations that the leadership have built on because they want the UAE, you want the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, to be very much perceived when it comes to be a safe place to live, and the service level is amazing. And trust me, they're doing a fantastic job. Now, some of the things that you need to look at is, when do values or purpose fail? And I spoke about that. When the values are there on the wall and no one is doing it, when it's not lived, when, let's say, there are cultural rituals. Let's say people come in the morning or before the start of the meeting, there is something that happens and no one does it. All right? Now, it's very important to have in mind that this is basically there because you need to live that corporate culture eventually. And people very much forget about the culture because they're trying to basically achieve that task, work on this specific thing, etc. All right? So people need to be reminded. This is very important. We're really pissed off at the end of the day or at the end of the month. But again, people need that reminder. And again, accountability sometimes makes you forget the values. And holding people accountable and keeping it very real is very, very important when it comes to that. Yeah? Now, the question that comes, and I get that a lot from a lot of people, is that do my personal value match with or align with the company value? Absolutely, they should. They should. Now, let's say that one of your core values is offering help or supporting people. All right? And you work in a company where teamwork is very much important. When you go and work with a team of, let's say, 4 or 5, what do you think will happen? If you have a core value, which is offering help or supporting people, you will have to do it. And you will have that fulfillment, that aspirational thing going on, because you did fulfill your core value and you did also do the company teamwork value as well. So they do come together. When they basically don't come together, it's going to be very difficult, but you have to separate it because you are in the company. You're there to satisfy a specific values and a specific corporate culture. Naturally, it should be very much an honest or very much a corporate culture, which is not fraud eventually. All right. So, I mean, for now, that's it about the values and the purpose. And I'd like you to take care of yourself and for those who you care about. And if you found this episode beneficial for you and or for someone who you care about, please share it and subscribe to my channels. You will find me on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. مع السلامة.